my friends. I'm so glad you're here. This is actually a recording session for the broadcast that's going to air. I think it's going to release on Tuesday. I've got a busy month of August getting ready to go to Sarnia, Ontario on Friday. And I just got confirmation that I'm going to be in Texas, going to Austin Friday night, August the 29th. I'll be in San Antonio Saturday, August 30th, and Houston at Houston Oasis on the morning of Sunday, August the 31st. And I'm going to have details on all those at I'll put them first at sethandrews.com/speaking. Just go to sethandrews.com and you will see them all there. Let me make a quick volume adjustment here. Hang on 10 seconds. I've got everything set a little bit differently because I've been editing my ghost hunt video, and I just finished it, and it's going to release early October. I cheated a little bit at the end because I'm doing kind of a what if, and I've inserted ghosts into the video that I shot where there were no ghosts, just for fun. And I needed one more scene, and I couldn't get back to the Brown Mansion, and so I shot it in my own house. And I'm like, well, everyone's going to probably know that it's not a 120-year-old home, and they're going to see the difference. But what the hell? It's not like I'm submitting it for Academy Award consideration. So anyway, that'll release in, let's see, what is it, August 5th? Probably 8 weeks. I'm interested in your calls. I'm going to read for you an article that prompted this whole discussion. So as I'm reading that, if you have an opinion, I encourage you to dial up and let me know what you think. And I'll I'll compile all this together, and it will officially go out here in 7 days, 5 days to patrons. There's something else I was going to say. What was it? On the tip of my tongue. You ever do that? Why did I walk in this room? What was their name? Where did I park? I do it all the time. All the time. God, it's just gone. Okay, let's take a look here. Share screen. Okay, there it is. I'm just going to read it from here. And then your comments. I wish to know what you think. Moving windows around. Oh, shit. This was originally posted by David Wong in 2016. Okay? And there is an article that shows a whole bunch of photographs, and I'll explain those. And I'll link this in the description box. Okay? I'm going to explain the Donald Trump phenomenon in 3 movies and then some text. There's this universal shorthand that epic adventure movies use to tell the good guys from the bad. The good guys are simple folk from the countryside, while the bad guys are decadent assholes who live in the city and wear stupid clothes. In Star Wars, Luke is a farm boy, while the bad guys live in a shiny space station. In Braveheart, the main character, Dennis Braveheart, is a simple farmer, and the dastardly Prince Shithead lives in a luxurious castle and wears fancy foppish clothes. The theme expresses itself in several ways: primitive versus advanced, tough versus delicate, masculine versus feminine, poor versus rich, pure versus decadent, traditional versus weird. All of it is code for rural versus urban. That tense divide between the two doesn't exist because of these movies. Obviously, these movies used it as shorthand because the divide already existed. And in the article, it references Braveheart, The Hunger Games, Star Wars, Iron Man, and I think one other film, okay? We country folk are programmed to hate the prissy elites. That brings us to Trump. It's not about red and blue states. It's about the country versus the city. I was born and raised in Trump country. My family are Trump people. If I hadn't moved away and gotten this ridiculous job, I'd be voting for him. I know I would." And again, he's a host of Cracked.com, which is the humor website, was a magazine, it is a podcast, and that's what he does today. He said, see, political types talk about red states and blue states, where red equals Republican conservative and blue equals Democrat progressive. But forget about states. If you want to understand the Trump phenomenon, dig up the much more detailed county map. Here's how the nation voted county by county in the 2012 election. Again, red is Republican. Now, if I may, I need to quickly say that the map itself was almost completely red. It was just like tons of red, and then there were little dots of blue, tiny little dots. But most of it was red. It looked like we were drowning in red. Okay? So I have to make sure and say that. Let's see. Where is my screen at? There it is. Okay. Holy cock slaps. That makes it look like Obama's Blue Party is some kind of fringe political faction that struggles to get 20% of the vote. The blue parts, however, are more densely populated. They're the cities. In the upper left, you see the blue Seattle-Tacoma area, lower down San Francisco, then L.A. The blue around the dick-shaped Lake Michigan is made of cities like Minneapolis, Milwaukee, and Chicago. And the northeast is, of course, New York and Boston, leading down into Philadelphia, which leads into a blue band which connects a bunch of southern cities like Charlotte and Atlanta. Blue islands in an ocean of red. The cities are less than 4% of the landmass, but 62% of the population, and easily 99% of the popular culture. Our movies, shows, songs, and news all radiate out from those blue islands. And if you live in the red, that fucking sucks. See, I'm from a blue state, Illinois, but the state isn't blue. Freaking Chicago is blue. I'm from a tiny town in one of those blood red areas. As a kid, visiting Chicago was like, well, Katniss visiting the capital, or like Zoe visiting the city of the future in this ridiculous book. Their ways are strange, and the whole goddamn world revolves around them. Every TV show is about L.A. or New York, maybe with some Chicago or Baltimore thrown in. When they did make a show about us, we were jokes, either wide-eyed, naive fluff balls, Parks and Recreation, and before that, Newhart, or filthy, murderous mutants, True Detective, and before that, Deliverance. You could feel the arrogance from hundreds of miles away. Nothing that happens outside the city matters, they say at their cocktail parties, blissfully unaware of where their food is grown. Hey, remember when Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans? Kind of weird that a big hurricane hundreds of miles across managed to snipe one specific city and avoid everything else. To watch the news or even the multiple movies and TV shows about it, you'd barely hear about how the storm utterly steamrolled rural Mississippi, killing 238 people and doing an astounding $125 billion in damage. But who cares about those people, right? What's newsworthy about a bunch of toothless hillbillies crying over a flattened trailer? New Orleans is culturally important. It matters. To those ignored, suffering people, Donald Trump is a brick chucked through the window of the elites. Are you assholes listening now? But isn't this really about race? Aren't Trump supporters just a bunch of racists? Don't they hate cities because that's where the brown people live? Look, we're going to get actual Nazis in the comment section of this article. Not calling them Nazis for argument points Nazis, but actual swastikas in their avatars rooted against Indiana Jones Nazis. Those people exist. But what I can say from personal experience is that the racism of my youth was always one step removed. I never saw a family member, friend, or classmate be mean to the actual black people we had in town. We worked with them, played video games with them, waved to them when they passed. What I did hear was several million comments about how if you ever ventured into the city, winding up in the wrong neighborhood meant you'd get dragged from your car, raped, and burned alive. Looking back, I think the idea was that the local minorities were fine as long as they acted exactly like us. If you'd asked me at the time, I'd have said the fear and hatred wasn't of people with brown skin, but of that specific tribe they have in Chicago. You know, the guys with the weird slang, music, and clothes, the dope fiends who murder everyone they see. It was all part of the bizarro nature of the cities as perceived from afar. A combination of hyper-aggressive savages and frivolous white elites. Their ways are strange. And it wasn't like pop culture was trying to talk me out of it. It's not just perception either. The stats back up the fact that these are parallel universes. People living in the countryside are twice as likely to own a gun and will probably get married younger. People in the urban blue areas talk faster and walk faster. They're more likely to be drug abusers, but less likely to be alcoholics. The blues are less likely to own land, and most importantly, they're less likely to be evangelical Christians. In the small towns, this often gets expressed as, they don't share our values, and my progressive friends love to scoff at that. What, like illiteracy and homophobia? Nope, everything. The cities are always living in the future. I remember when our little town got our first Chinese restaurant and 20 years later its first fancy coffee shop. All of this stuff had turned up in movies set in L.A., of course, decades earlier. I remember watching 80s movies and mocking the Valley Girl stereotypes. Young girls from like California who would say like in between every third word. 20 years later, you can hear me doing the same in every cracked podcast. The cancer started in L.A. and spread to the rest of America. Well, the perception back then was that those city folks were all turning atheist, abandoning church for their bisexual sex parties. That, we were told, was literally a sign of the apocalypse, not just due to the spiritual consequences, which were dire, but the devastation that would come to the culture. I couldn't imagine any rebuttal. In that place at that time, the church was everything. Don't take my word for it. Listen to the experts. Church was where you made friends, met girls, networked for jobs, got social support. The poor could get food and clothes there. Couples could get advice on their marriages. Addicts could try to get clean. But now we're seeing a startling decline in Christianity among the general population, the godless disease having spread alongside Valley Girl talk. So according to Fox News, what's the result of these decadent, atheist, amoral snobs in the cities having turned up their noses at God? Chaos. The fabric is broken down, they say, just as predicted. And what rural Americans see on the news today is a sneak peek at their tomorrow. The savages are coming. Blacks riot. Muslims set bombs. Gays spread AIDS. Mexican cartels behead children. Atheists tear down Christmas trees. Meanwhile, those liberal Lena Dunhams in their $5,000 a month apartments sip wine and say, but those white Christians are the real problem. Terror victims scream in the street next to their own severed limbs. And the response from the elites is to cry about how men should be allowed to use women's restrooms and how it's cruel to keep chickens in cages. Madness. Their heads are so far up their asses that they can't tell up from down. Basic, obvious truths that have gone unquestioned for thousands of years now get laughed at or shouted down. The fact that hard work is better than dependence on government, that children do better with both parents in the picture, that peace is better than rioting, that a strict moral code is better than blithe hedonism, that humans tend to value things they've earned more than what they get for free, that not getting exploded by a bomb is better than getting exploded by a bomb. Or as they say out in the country, don't piss on my leg and tell me it's raining. The foundation upon which America was undeniably built, family, faith, and hard work, had been deemed unfashionable and small-minded. Those snooty elites up in their ivory tower laughed as they kicked away that foundation and then wrote 10,000-word think pieces blaming the builders for the ensuing collapse. Don't message me saying all those things I listed are wrong. I know they're wrong. Or rather, I think they're wrong, because I now live in a blue county and work for a blue industry. I know the good old days of the past were built on slavery and segregation. I know that entire categories of humanity experienced religion as a boot on their neck. I know that those traditional families involved millions of women trapped in kitchens and bad marriages. I know gays lived in fear and abortions were back alley affairs. I know the changes were for the best. Try telling that to anybody who lives in Trump country. They're getting the shit kicked out of them. I know, I was there. Step outside of the city and the suicide rate among young people fucking doubles. The recession pounded rural communities, but all the recovery went to the cities. The rate of new businesses opening in rural areas has utterly collapsed. See, rural jobs used to be based around one big local business, a factory, a coal mine, etc. When it dies, the town dies. Where I grew up, it was an oil refinery closing that did us in. I was raised in the hollowed-out shell of what the town had once been. The roof of our high school leaked when it rained. Cities can make up for the loss of manufacturing jobs with service jobs. Small towns cannot. That model doesn't work below a certain population density. If you don't live in one of these small towns, you can't understand the hopelessness. The vast majority of possible careers involve moving to the city, and around every city is now a 100-foot wall called cost of living. Let's say you're a smart kid making $8 an hour at Walgreens and aspire to greater things. Fine. Get ready to move yourself and your new baby into a 700-square-foot apartment for $1,200 a month, and then pay double what you're paying for utilities, groceries, and babysitters. Unless, of course, you're planning to move to one of those neighborhoods. Hope you like being set on fire. That is, if they don't replace the only room you can afford with a $3,300 per month high-rise. In a city, you can plausibly aspire to start a band or become an actor, get a medical degree. You can actually have dreams. In a small town, there may be no venues for performing arts aside from country music bars and churches. There may be only 2 doctors in town. Aspiring to that job means waiting for one of them to retire or die. You open the classifieds and all the job listings will be for fast food or convenience stores. The downtown is just the corpses of mom and pop stores left shattered in Walmart's blast crater. The suburbs are trailer parks. There are parts of these towns that look post-apocalyptic. I'm telling you, the hopelessness eats you alive. And if you dare complain, some liberal elite will pull out their iPad and type up a rant about your racist white privilege. Already, someone has replied to this with a comment saying, you should try living in a ghetto as a minority. Exactly. To them, it seems like the plight of poor minorities is only used as a club to bat away white cries for help. Meanwhile, the rate of rural white suicides and overdoses skyrockets. Shit, at least politicians act like they care about the inner cities. It really does feel like the worst of both worlds. All the ravages of poverty, but none of the sympathy. Blacks burn police cars and those liberal elites say it's not their fault because they're poor. My son gets jailed and fired over a baggie of meth, and those same elites make jokes about his missing teeth. You're everyone's punching bag, one of society's last remaining safe comedy targets. They take it hard. These are people who come from a long line of folks who took pride in looking after themselves. Where I'm from, you weren't a real man unless you could repair a car, patch a roof, hunt your own meat, and defend your home from an intruder. It was a source of shame to be dependent on anyone, especially the government. You mowed your own lawn and fixed your own pipes when they leaked. You hauled your own firewood in your own pickup truck. Mine was a 1994 Ford Ranger. The current owner says it still runs. Not like those hipsters in their tiny apartments or those people in their public housing projects, waiting for the landlord anytime something breaks, knowing if things get too bad, they can just pick up and move. When you don't own anything, it's all someone else's problem. They probably don't pay taxes either. Just treating America itself as a subsidized apartment they can trash. The rural folk with the Trump signs in their yards say their way of life is dying, and you smirk and say what they really mean is that blacks and gays are finally getting equal rights, and they hate it. But I'm telling you, they say their way of life is dying because their way of life is dying. It's not their imagination. No movie about the future portrays it as being full of traditional families, hunters, and coal mines. Well, except for Hunger Games, and that was depicted as an apocalypse. So, yes, they vote for the guy promising to put things back the way they were, the guy who'd be a wake-up call to the Blue Islands. They voted for the brick through the window. It was a vote of desperation. But Trump is objectively a piece of shit, you say. He insults people, he objectifies women and cheats whenever possible, and he's not an everyman. He's a smarmy, arrogant billionaire. Wait, are you talking about Donald Trump or this guy? And in the actual article, which is too populated with ads for me to want to go through here, it's got a picture of Iron Man from the Marvel movie. So it was a superhero. You've never rooted for somebody like that, someone powerful who gives your enemies the insults they deserve, somebody with big fun appetites who screws up just enough to make them relatable, like Dr. House or Walter White or any of the several million renegade cop characters who can break all the rules because they get shit done, who only get shit done because they don't care about the rules. But those are fictional characters. Okay, what about all those millionaire left-leaning talk show hosts? You think they keep their insults classy? Tune into any bit about Chris Christie and start counting down the seconds until the fat joke. Google David Letterman's sex scandals. But it's okay because they're on our side and everybody wants an asshole on their team. A spiked bat to smash their enemies with. That's all Trump is. The howls of elite outrage are like the sounds of bombs landing on the enemy's fortress. The louder, the better. Already, some of you have gotten angry, feeling this gut-level revulsion at any attempt to excuse or even understand these people. After all, they're hardly people, right? Aren't they just a mass of ignorant, rageful, crude, cursing, spitting subhumans? Gee, I hope not. I have to hug a bunch of them at Thanksgiving. And when I do, it'll be with the knowledge that if I hadn't moved away, I'd be on the other side of the fence, leaving nasty comments on this article the alternative version, the alternate universe version of me wrote. It feels good to dismiss people, to mock them, to write them off as deplorables, but you might as well take time to try to understand them, because I'm telling you, they'll still be around long after Trump is gone. There's a lot in there that is correct. And it bugs me because And I'm not being extra charitable with myself when I say I know I would have never fallen for Donald Trump when I was, I just know it. I fell for Ronald Reagan, fine. William F. Buckley, fine. You know, I listened to early Glenn Beck, fine. This is before he lost his fucking mind, really. I mean, he was more of an entertainer before he got political. Then the eyebrows started to raise, right? But I remember seeing the charlatans and the cons and the grifters, whether they were evangelical or whatever, and I was like, nah, they're full of shit. And I am convinced I would have seen Donald Trump and said, that guy's full of shit. He's full of hate and anger and vengeance and grift, and he's just terrible. So it is hard for me to look at many MAGAs and not feel in my heart the desire to shake them by the shoulders and say, are you this fucking stupid? And then the other part of me says, brainwashing is real. And there is a culture war going on, and these people live in a disinformation silo, and they have had their fears stoked by fear mongers, and they can be perpetrators of bad ideas, but also be the victims of bad ideas. And you're not going to insult them out of these bad ideas. And some people have been rescued from hate and horrors and conspiracy theories, and it's possible. We are all the human condition. Let's do what we can to change the culture. And then I flip again and say, screw those people. It's been 10 years. If they haven't gotten it by now, they never will. Back and forth. These two sets are always arguing with themselves. I'm doing a speech throughout the month. I'm doing it here this weekend in Sarnia, which actually has two sets separated by a buzzer. And I give one opinion where I'm trying to be like, take the high road and say, well, it's true. We've got to try to reach these people. Lots of good people have terrible ideas. What the hell is wrong with these chowderheads? They are as sharp as soup, for God's sake. Jeez. But, we really do need to keep working and remembering that humanity has great amounts of good. We're capable of wonderful things. We're going to completely screw everything up and die horribly. I go back and forth. I see someone in the comments, and I agree that some people are reachable, some are not. There's somebody on my radar. I don't know why I engage her. Well, I do know why. She reaches out to me every 6 months, and she wants to ask me about some lib thing that she doesn't understand. Well, why do the libs do this? And how do you justify that? Because she knew me back when I was a believer. Back when I was a, Fox News Christian. So I'm trying to explain what's going on, because she gets all of her info or disinfo from Fox News, and it is jaw-dropping, the shit that comes out of her mouth. What? So I sent that rant that Trump recently did about how Taylor Swift is no longer hot. That's the president of the United States. And he's ranting about, well, I criticized her, and now she's being booed in public. And Taylor Swift is now a failure. Now, beyond that, she's just not hot. She used to be hot. She's not hot anymore, ever since I said she wasn't hot. Jesus Christ. This is a sitting president using social media to talk about this stuff. So I screen capped it, and I sent it to her, and I said, okay. Can you explain to me how this is in any way mature, responsible, or presidential? And I waited for the response. Half an hour. The response was, it's always frustrated me. I wish he wouldn't post on social media. I'm sorry, what? What? The problem isn't where he's posting it. The problem is that he's 12. And this is how his mind works. Right? Arguably the most powerful person in the United States. And this is what he does with his time. This is how his mind works. This is the vomit that comes out of his mouth and reaches into the keyboard and goes out on truth. So the problem isn't that he's using social media. The problem is he's 12 and not even a good, well-trained, responsible 12-year-old of moral character. He's just, come on. Taylor Swift is not hot. Jesus. And I think you are as sharp as a marble. I don't know how to even reason with that. So then I follow up. Actually, no, she then said, what do you think about, speaking of immature, what do you think about all these Democratic politicians who are leaving the state of Texas so that they don't have a, I just blanked on the word. A quorum to be able to redistrict or further gerrymander the state to give Republicans 5 more seats. How mature is that? I'm like, mature? I don't think it's enough. Quorum. Thank you. Yes. You know, the idea that the Republican Party and the MAGAs and the Project 2025 types, etc., have been playing against the rules. There are no rules. There are no scruples. There are no boundaries. There's no depth to which they will not fall. They will break the whole thing down to get what they want. And I appreciate this in many ways, we are still constraining ourselves by decorum, by guidelines, right? Because we don't want to become them to beat them. But at some level, I think we're going to have to get fucking crafty. We're going to have to get crafty. We're going to have to be smarter. We're going to have to find opportunities to use some of the stuff that they have done against them to pull the rug out from underneath them. This idea that we're going to pat them on the hand and say, well, the rules say this. They don't give a shit about the rules. We're going to have to find another way to push back. So yes, get your ass out of Texas. Get out of there so that they don't have a quorum and they can't have the vote. And let's find other ways to sort of scheme through there to block them at every turn. Let's frustrate the hell out of them. Let's keep them up at night. Let's get them ranting and frothing and pounding their fist and bloviating on Fox News and Newsmax all day. Let them go. Let them lose their minds. Gavin Newsom, love him or hate him, says, fine, you want to do that to Texas? I'll turn every fucking county in California blue. Have a nice day. Oh, yes. Yes, yes, it's sweet ambrosia. More of this, please. I don't think it's immature. I think it's strategy, and it's about time. Rural versus urban, country versus city, us versus them. 2 different worlds that see each other in very different ways, sometimes fairly, sometimes unfairly. I want to know what you think. And does much of this explain MAGA cult and the allegiance to Trump? Phone lines are open. Web link to dial in is in the description box. And as I wait for you to dial in, let me tell you a story. MAGA culture is infected with neo-Nazis. All right? This idea that, well, I mean, some I think are single issue voters, so they just decided, well, abortion is it, and I'm going to totally shut my brain off to any other thing. I don't care. La, 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 abortion, pro-life, abortion. La, la. There are a lot of people that do that. They're totally disconnected. They're uneducated, uninformed. They don't know anything else about anything else. It's just that they know pro-life Republican and that Democrats are murdering babies, and that's it. Right? No matter what else, it can't be as bad as child murder. So I'm going to vote Trump. It's an imperfect vote. I know he's not a perfect guy. He's flawed, but we're not murdering babies. And that's the beginning and the end of the whole conversation. There are other people who are like free market. which is bizarre to me because many of these people make, not much money. And they admire the squillionaires who are spending, what was that hydrogen-powered yacht that Bill Gates was auctioning off worth like $600 million? Like that ship would build 100,000 homes worth more than six figures for people who did not have homes. It would fund cancer research. It would be aid for Gaza. It's a fucking boat. And they look at this and they're like, yes, we love those guys. Right? And I wonder, is it because this is the goal? Like they fantasize about having so much money that they can have their own $600 million hydrogen-powered yacht? Maybe. That's the dream, right? That's how we were trained. It wasn't about, success, which I love. Be a millionaire. I hope you become a millionaire. I just don't want you to be a hoarder. In a world with this much suffering, can you justify being a wealth hoarder? But for them, it all becomes about the free market. Single issues, those types of things. But there are some people who honestly, they're bigoted. They're just bigoted. They're bigoted. They're afraid of everybody and everything. LGBT people terrify them. They won't admit that they're racist, but some won't admit that they're racist. Some are racist. Let me tell you this story, and Natalie will not mind me telling you this story about a member of her extended family because, frankly, neither one of us give a shit. Okay? We're both tired. We don't care. So there's somebody on her extended family tree, and I'm just going to call him Uncle Richard. Okay? Uncle Richard is from and still lives in a suburb of Tulsa, Oklahoma. Now, Tulsa is about 1 million people strong, but it's, compared to other cities, would be considered itself, rural. Where you look at huge cities like New York City and Chicago and Los Angeles. I mean, we are kind of still a small town. We have that vibe in many ways. So then imagine a suburb of Tulsa. Now we're really talking small town. And the further you get out, you're looking at more land and the type of thing where there's cows and horses and chickens and fences and tractors and all that stuff, right? It's true. It's Oklahoma. And Uncle Richard is that kind of dude. He lives there in the suburb of Tulsa. And he's just as white as the day is long, as white as I am. He has silver hair, and he is a fixer. He's not a deep thinker. He will never be missed at NASA, okay? I just have to throw it out there. This man is not a person of great depth, from what I have seen. But he's really good at the practical. You want your roof repaired? You want your fence fixed? You want a tractor? You want a car built from scratch? The guy could build a car from scratch. So he's got a good engineering mind in that way. But when it comes to thinking in the abstract or about the ideological, philosophical, theological discussions of the day, you can see him glaze over. Right? So anyway, Uncle Richard, his nephew, I don't know, something like that. For the purposes of my story, it's the nephew. It's somebody along those lines. Takes a rare visit to his house. And he walks into this, I guess it was the living room, and he sees on the wall there's a display, like a framed display. And he realizes one of the things in the display looks suspiciously like a swastika. He says, "Hey, Uncle Richard, can you come here for a second?" "What's up?" "Okay, is that a swastika on the wall?" "Oh, yeah. Like Nazis? Like swastika?" "Well, yes. It's a collectible, you see. It is, it actually dates back to the 1940s. And it's one of those valuable collectibles that people, it's just a piece of memorabilia And, it's a part of history, and I'm interested in history, and so that's why I have kept this thing. Well, of course, the nephew is not satisfied with this answer. He says, why is it framed and on the wall? The conversation becomes more and more uncomfortable until finally Uncle Richard just says the quiet part out loud. Well, you know what? This country, white people have always been under attack by those liberal, woke, elite people in this country. And I tell you right now, I'd be just as happy if they'd ground up all the brown people, all them browns, and put them in planes and ships and just get them the hell out of this country. We'd be a much better America without those people. And of course, his nephew is horrified because this is the first time that on that particular part of the family, on their radar, they have seen that Uncle Richard is a neo-Nazi. He's a Nazi. So that story has blown up. Natalie's just done. I think her words, fuck those people. And she just deleted all of them. Everybody is part of that pod. Boom, gone. Out of there. She is done. I get that. But nobody's saying that there isn't white supremacy baked into MAGA culture, much of MAGA culture. But, it's not either or. It's not all nothing. There's so many ingredients to that recipe in many cases. And we on the left sometimes become reductive, simplistic, binary thinkers, and we want everybody to be the Nazi. And then we come up with rationalizations that say, well, even the peace-loving Germans who did nothing in the civilian residential areas, they turned away when the concentration camps were built. You know what we call those people? We call them Nazis. But I don't think it's quite that simple when it comes to MAGA culture. I get it. I understand it. But I don't know. So then we come back to rural, urban. Rural, urban. Is it the country people looking at the snobby elites and saying, I don't give a shit. They don't get me. And whoever throws the brick through their window, that's just fine with me. There may be, I think, some truth to that. And I think there is always merit in understanding that. But I want to know what you think. Okay? Switchboard's open. Didn't mean to rant as long as I did, but that's what I do. James is dialing in from 817. James, are you there?
Good morning, Seth. It's great to talk to you again today.
What's up?
I just wanted to add something to this. I started thinking about, as I was growing up, and it's been a long time, when we were growing up, things were so much different. The Christian conservative values pretty much dominated the culture in our country. What I mean by that is the majority of people just accepted it as that's how things were. I mean, if you went outside of that norm, then people would give you dirty looks. I mean, they could correct you just by giving you that look, that side eye. And you knew you were messing up. You knew that you were on the wrong path, and you better not stray too far from those normative values that were just that way back in the day. It didn't take anything to enforce their worldview. And now that the culture has changed so far outside of that, I think they've just gone crazy with the fact that they can't control the culture anymore. I mean, this fight has been going on forever. This isn't a new fight. They've been priming for this type of battle between us versus them for as long as I can remember. I mean, for at least the last 30 years, talk radio, conservative television has been priming the pump. And then the internet came along and set it all on fire because a certain amount of us realized that we weren't alone, that the thoughts that we had weren't crazy, and that what we had to think and say made sense. And it wasn't bad. We had other people that agreed with us, that back in the day they weren't in our community. We had no way to connect with those people. So when we did, we found out we weren't alone. And all of a sudden, the culture started shifting out from underneath the way things used to be. And especially older people, they can't deal with that.
I think us versus them has always been around, don't you think? And on some level, but you're right about the media, the connected world. It has become so much more amplified.
And it's all about money. I mean, we can't forget that the powers that be, this is all about money. Wealth inequality is worse than it's been in a very long time. And they've successfully pitted us against each other. And I don't know, with the culture wars raging the way they are, I don't know how we walk back from that. They're destroying our country.
Do you think we'll ever bounce back? Just speculating?
I have a hard time maintaining hope that will happen. Every day when you just see the direction of things that are going, I mean, I guess it gives me some hope when I see in the news that they start to revolt against certain things. But when they start feeling, when it gets so bad, when it gets so bad that they can no longer ignore it because it affects them and not just us, it affects them, and they start feeling the effects of the actions that they brought about, then I guess it's possible that people could become humble enough to start talking to one another again in a way that maybe we could work towards solutions and not just throwing Molotov cocktails at one another. I hope that's the case. I mean, I think that's what we need. But I couldn't even begin to speculate whether we'll ever get there or not.
I've heard some people say they'll support Trump because Trump hates who they hate. I think there are some people like that. What's your perception?
Absolutely. I don't know how they don't. It seems like they don't care. As long it's just a game. It's like a football game. Politics is like a football game. I've got my team, and I'm going to beat, and I'm going to win, and at all costs. And all the things that they said that they used to believe in and like hold as sacred, like the Constitution or law and order, or just things that were very basic to the core identity to that particular group. They've just given it up and said, hey, we're on the winning team, and whatever you want to do to win is okay by us. And I think Trump is terribly bombastic and caustic towards our culture, towards the people. I hate to see that they've fallen so far away from what they once said that they believed. This country can never survive the type of culture that they're creating right now. It's terribly destructive towards building a successful country.
James, I appreciate your call and perspective as part of this much larger discussion, and I'm sure we'll talk again. Thanks for dialing in, man.
Love you, Seth. Take care.
Appreciate you. Some people, I think, are afraid of change. There are certain personality types that are averse to change. They are more prone to want routine and structure. Those people, I think, travel less. They are less interested in what is different or who is different. You know, they experiment less, and I'm not just talking about sexually, but I mean everything from diet to life experiences, etc. There have been studies about people who tend to lean more into MAGA type culture, and those traits seem to line up. They yearn for yesteryear, or this myth of yesteryear. Maybe they want to go back before black people could vote and before interracial marriage was legal, and back when women were paid less if they worked and they were encouraged to stay home and be barefoot and pregnant. And maybe that's the reality they do want to return to. But I think others have sort of embraced this lie that, well, back then it was all the Norman Rockwell painting kind of thing. It was all so pristine. We never locked our doors at night, and no one was forced to wear seatbelts, and everybody was neighborly and happy. And it's this totally fabricated 1950s Americana that they yearn for. And I think that is a reflection in many cases of white privilege, because if you weren't white and probably male in the 1950s, in the 1960s, things were not necessarily all that good for you. Those were not the good old days. But I just lost my train of thought. It'll come back to me. How much coffee have I had? Hang on, there's more. Oh, change. I think those who are promised structure, I think they respond to someone who says, I will bring structure. Plus, if someone says, I alone can fix it, I am the chosen one, trust me, follow me, they are primed to line up behind a shepherd. That allows them to check out. They don't have to get into the messy noise, the white noise of the world. They don't have to participate. They don't have to get their hands dirty. They can just say, he's my guy. Let's send him off into the Colosseum. He shall do battle in our name. And then we're going to go off and watch the Kardashians or whatever else they're going to go to. I mean, I don't know. Does MAGA watch? Yeah, I think they do. They do. I'm thinking of one MAGA right now. She is hooked on The Bachelor, The Golden Bachelor, and a show called Farmer Wants a Wife, which I'm guessing is The Bachelor in Hooterville. And Hooterville is the name of the town from a 1960s sitcom. What was the name of that sitcom? It wasn't Green Acres. What was the one? Green Acres was the one with the dun 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 bum bum. Remember that song? Dun 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 dun. Green Acres is the place to be. I can still remember the song. Farm living is the life for me. Petticoat Junction. Petticoat Junction. Thank you very much for that. Oh. Okay. Oh, shit. Somebody, you ever have strangers call you on Zoom? It used to be Skype. They just dial you in and you're like, who the hell are you? There was another one too. It wasn't the Andy Griffith Show. Hee Haw. Yeah, that was another one. Man, we watched a lot of Hee Haw growing up. Hee Haw was funny. Hang on just a second for me. 505. Hee Haw was funny because it was targeted to conservative country folk, because it was like people in straw hats and they were sitting on hay bales singing country songs with Roy Rogers. But Hee Haw was loaded with women who were wearing these little, I don't know, tablecloth looking mini skirts, and their boobs were busting out, so the wholesome family values types were totally watching. It was like Benny Hill with corn. That's what Hee Haw was like. I'm sorry, 505, hi. Are you there?
I am, Seth. It's good to talk to you. My name is Brent.
Brent, welcome. Let's talk. What's your perspective on the things we have been speaking about?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, the rural-urban divide is really interesting. I was actually more interested in your take on it, given that you were a pundit for a while, and you know what appeals to that particular demographic. So what do you think is the primary separation that we're seeing?
Well, for me, and I wrote about this in Fox News Christian, I was in a disinformation bubble. So what happened is they told me the left-wing, quote, mainstream media, they're all infected. They're infected with permissive attitudes, godlessness. They hate America. Part of that, I think, had to do with this idea that they didn't really consider our borders sacred. So the one world government was part of that narrative. And I was taught to believe that a one world government meant the Antichrist and the devil is going everywhere. I remember I would leave my job at KXOJ Radio, and Rush Limbaugh would be on starting at 1 o'clock. So my shift ended at 1. I did the morning show, and then it was all production and other things. And I would be in my car just in time for the first hour of his monologue. And I would be totally centered and calm. And by the time I got home, 20 minutes later, I would be livid. Because what's this country coming to? And those permissive, progressive, immoral people, I can't believe they hate America. This place is going to hell in a handbasket. And so I was in that place where I was hyper-targeted through right-wing media to believe that everybody was coming for everything I had. They were all godless, immoral, and un-American. And, you know, when you have that attitude, it is really easy to other someone else. And the fact that everybody in my circle was like me. They were all Sunday go to meeting church hypocrites. You know, they all listened to the same music. They went to the same movies. They talked the same way. I wasn't introduced to other people in any meaningful way until I got into my 30s. And man, it opened up my world. So that's my long version of the short answer. Does that make any sense?
No, I gotcha. No, yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, what I heard was, number one, you kind of found yourself in an information silo. You were sort of stuck with the same opinions, with the same people all the time. There was this idea of a conspiracy that kept rolling around, right? The rise of the Antichrist, the one world government, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, tying into religion. And then this rage machine that the right wing makes, right? This, like, just get mad about something because it sells. It sells. And then the last thing I think that you mentioned was this whole idea of patriotism and othering people. So with regard to the rural population, what do you think would be the most effective way to address those? The information silo, conspiracy, religion, rage machine, or patriotism?
So your question to me is, how do we fix the world?
No. Just the rural population.
Sorry. That was unfair to you. I'm sorry, but I mean, how do we convince those? We have been frustrated by, you know, how do we? I, in my own circle, when I'm not in a room with people who are my tribe, who are just as outraged and horrified and grieved, and we're saying all the things that were, you know, all the primal things that emit out from our gut. When I'm actually engaging person like the MAGA, who we were talking on the phone a couple of months ago and who I texted just a few days ago, I'm leading with questions. I'm trying to engage with a legitimate attitude of concern without insult, in the hopes of planting a seed that might germinate and become something, knowing not everybody can be reachable. But I'll tell you, I haven't had a whole lot of success. I have seen some people get out. There are people who are in our family tree. I've got nephews and nieces. Natalie's got some cousins. We didn't think they'd ever bust out of conservatism. They're pissed, and they're going hard publicly at Trump, to the horror of their MAGA family. So some people are getting out. My approach is imperfect. I'm just trying to speak and create an atmosphere of safety.
No, absolutely. I don't expect I don't expect a panacea. The people you were talking about, are they more of the urban population or more of the rural population, the ones who are sort of turning on Trump right now?
Both. There are a couple in my mind. Actually, one of them just moved to Massachusetts. You may have seen that statistic where Oklahoma just got ranked 50 in education, while Massachusetts is ranked number 1. And they purposefully went online and said,
New Mexico isn't last. New Mexico isn't last. Finally. Sorry.
They left and moved out and Go said, ahead. FYI, I am moving out of this backward ass state and I'm going to Massachusetts. And she moved a few months ago before the stat came out, but she's already out of here. And then there was somebody else who lives in another suburb, a suburb called Sapulpa, Oklahoma, and she's pissed. So I've seen city and I've seen regional and rural. I've seen them both, man.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just trying to think back about the things that you had said about kind of where you were at the time, that information silo, this conspiracy mindset tied into religion, and the rage machine of the right wing, and patriotism and othering. I really kind of feel like the best approach when it comes to the rural population is attacking them on that level of patriotism and othering, because they have neighbors. Rural communities are by their very nature communal. And so they will bond together to try to protect themselves from what they appear to be outsiders. And within that inside group, there are LGBTQIA people, there are trans people, there's all sorts of neighbors that they have. So I really think approaching it from that perspective, looking at it from the, hey, you know what, these are our neighbors, these are our friends, these are our fellow Americans, I think that's really the approach on the rural side. But that's my take.
All right. Thanks for a perspective that we can all sort of talk about, and think about, and chew on. And I thanks so much for calling on the show.
Awesome. And I thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate what you do. And hey, keep on getting on those call-in shows because you rock those callers better than anybody else, in my opinion.
You're very kind. We'll see you later. Thanks. He's talking about my guest shots on the Line Network. And if you're not subscribed to the Line, just go on YouTube and type it in. You'll see it pops up. And there's a whole bunch of people who co-host. Matt Delahanty's on there, and they bring in Aaron Raw, Paula Gia, Eve Was Framed is there, Shannon Q, Erica Gutsick Gibbon, Forrest Valkai. And Forrest and I, we hosted just a few days ago. Again, they like this pairing of me and Forrest. It's the dynamic of our personalities apparently gels really well because, Forrest, he's a Jack Russell Terrier. He's just like, and me, but I lately have been a little more animated, maybe too much so. And it is an interesting format. It's very much a different animal than what we do here, where you and I are having conversations really as a family, as a community about the culture at large. And we do have some people call in and challenge and disagree, but it's a different vibe. And I think, there are a lot more layers to the onion. Where the Line, at least when I'm co-hosting the Sunday show or Skep Talk, is theists, mostly theists who call in and they are trying to explain or prove or defend God. And I'll tell you, that's some weak sauce, man. It's weak sauce. Some of these serial callers, I swear, it'll say on the switchboard, 26 previous calls to the Line. Jesus, I'm sorry, you called 26 times? Do you just like hearing your voice on the air? Because I suspect you just like hearing your voice on the air. And they talk about all kinds of crazy stuff. The fact that we can envision God means there must be a God. I think that's the ontological argument, or they get into divine, the cosmos itself is God, and therefore we all worship because we are parts of nature. And even if we don't think we believe in God, if we're part of nature, we are still God believers. What? Some guy called a few days ago. What was he talking? He kept quoting the Bible to prove the Bible. And he talked about, total digression. He talked about Jesus and how, what was the number one message of Jesus? Well, I don't think Jesus had a number one message, unless it was the salvation message. And his take was love people and love God, which, okay, fine. But he was quoting like Jesus was a proven real dude, and we take everything he says as literal gospel. And so we're like, well, if we're going to do that, we got to get into some of the other Jesus sayings that are a tad problematic, right? Problems, danger, And he just kept pinballing back to the happy clappy Jesus. And Forrest and I are like, what about the guy who came to bring a sword to divide everybody? Families to be splintered, and he's going to send everybody to hell. And blah, blah. We just went back and forth. And I did find after 20 minutes of that, I was ready to stick a fork in my eyeball. And there is a part of me that's like, I'm sorry. If an omni-God exists, his way of demonstrating himself is to have you call us and defend him on YouTube? There's a part of me that does have that. But it's an interesting exercise. It's kind of a distraction, So I do it. Anyway, it's on the Line, and they have shows almost every day of the week. You must subscribe. It is the Wild, Wild West. Peggy is dialing in from area code 404. Peggy, thanks for your patience. Are you there?
I am, Seth. How are you?
I'm so good, except for the fact that the country's on fire and there's a fascist takeover, and I'm worried about the collective IQ of half of the country. And
I understand,
never mind.
And that's why I appreciate you.
Oh, okay. All right. I'm sorry. I
That's
didn't
why
mean to be a downer.
I appreciate you and your show.
Well, hit me, Peggy. What's
And
on your mind?
Okay, well, this show is my life, what you're talking about here, because I was born in Chicago. We had to move to Tennessee when I was 6, so all of my education was in the South. And now I've been living in Atlanta for almost 30 years, and where I'm in the only blue dot in a big red state, like you were talking about. And all of my family that I have left is still in Tennessee, very MAGA fundamentalist Christians, including friends that I used to go to church with, because I used to be also. And my sister, who is my closest family member, I didn't even know she thought that she had any racist or fundamentalist thoughts until 2017. And so, which was, Trump's first year in office. And I do think that a lot of what, that he just gives people permission to say their hate out loud. It's like they were validated in what they always believed somehow. And I know that my oldest sister was the first person on my mom's side of the family to go to college, and I was the second. And we have lots of cousins there. And it was really considered disloyal to go away to college. You shouldn't leave the family or the country and go where there's all these other people with all these other ways of thinking and all these races. It was just like, why in the world would you even want to do that? And so it is heartbreaking to me that my sister and I, in order to stay in communication, can no longer talk about religion or politics, which are both like pretty much all I'm thinking about lately. So we talk about family. We have to leave everything else out. I certainly have friends, high school friends on Facebook that I see them post things from time to time. And MAGA, people who are MAGA now. So in high school, those things weren't even issues. I remember even talking about religion and politics in the 60s, which is when I was in high school. And at first I would think, I just need to post the facts because they're believing this crazy stuff. Just post the truth and that'll matter. And I realized it didn't at all. And some of the things they would say back would be so despicable. When one woman said something so despicable, I just gave up trying to even just counter with facts, with not criticizing anybody, not putting anybody down. But it just didn't seem to matter because their choices and their beliefs right now are based on emotion and also very much based on their religions, and they trust their pastors. So if they're told that at church especially, you can't challenge it. And I am just a hipster. It's just because I eat kale and recycle makes me, somebody who thinks she's better than everybody else. So
you hippie. You liberal hippie, you wanting to make the world a better place and eating kale. I mean, what's this country coming to? We're all a bunch of cow eaters here in the United States. I know what you mean when it comes to trying to make a dent with facts. Just a few days ago, Donald Trump made the outrageous claim that he had reduced the cost of pharmaceutical drugs by 1,500%. And so I said to a MAGA Trump supporter in my circle, I said, you realize that Trump just made the claim that the pharmaceutical companies are now paying us when we buy their drugs. Well, how do you explain that? And there was no response. Totally got ghosted. Like, I think they shut down and went la, 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 la in their mind, and they didn't even want to talk about it. And there's a lot of that going on in there, Peggy.
A lot. Yeah, and that's what would happen so much in discussions with my sister was just I would say something logical back like, well, what about January 6th? I mean, like, how do you reconcile him trying to overthrow the entire government? And she actually said, well, I don't know about that.
Well, what I hear is, what about the riots in Portland? Or didn't you see the other side of the Pentagon where the police officers were allowing protesters to come in and take a little, meandering walk through the halls in a very peaceful way why aren't they being acknowledged? Or I guess that's an inside job, conspiracy theory, or maybe Antifa is part of it. I don't know. There's always an excuse, isn't there?
There is. I mean, she does have a ready answer until I say something logical that really is based in fact back. And then she really doesn't have anything to come back with. And then she has to hang up. She has to go, and she just cuts it off. And she says, I'm not cutting you off. I just got to fix dinner. I'm not cutting you off, but she obviously is. And so I've just quit because honestly, I feel so much anger and I love her. She is my younger sister and I want to stay close to her. But the things that she believes now, and she's not a stupid person. She's not ignorant. And that's another thing that confuses me. I know some people who I consider very smart who still voted for Trump 3 times. I don't know what they all think now because I haven't been communicating with them anymore. And but they aren't stupid people. And it's just so baffling to me that they don't want to look at like it's worth it to not have to see gay people on commercials. So what if people are being snatched off the street and being treated like dogs? I don't have to watch gay people on commercials where I live anymore.
I'd like to, without being pedantic, I want to draw a quick distinction, and I know you mean this distinction. Ignorance and stupidity, I don't think are the same thing. I mean, ignorance being the lack of knowledge, even willful ignorance. I think ignorance can be fixed. I do worry that stupid is forever. There is someone who you can give them you can educate them, you can give them the info that they need, and they will still reject it or twist it, distort it. I think ignorance and stupidity are 2 different things. Hell, I'm ignorant about a ton of stuff. And yet I'd like to think that I don't walk through my day stupidly. And you and I share that frustration. And I think a lot of people listening to the sound of your voice, they've gone through the same things. If politics or religion comes up during the holidays, it's gonna be Thunderdome. So it's better that we just shut up and everything's sort of under the surface. Let's get through the day. But I'm frustrated. I'm heartbroken. I'm angry. And that's just where we are. And so I think a lot of people relate to that, Peggy.
Yeah. And it makes me feel not genuine anymore when I'm around them. And it's heartbreaking to me that our relationship has to be superficial now, which is how it feels to me. Because we used to talk about everything.
Was that a discussion that you had? Not to belabor, the point, but did you say, okay, from now on, we need to talk about other things, no more religion and politics?
Yes. We both agreed on that because we both got so angry. I
don't bring it up around my family, but I'll tell you, I don't really see my family anymore. Like I don't want to be around them. I'm pissed.
Yeah.
I'm mad. I'm just so outraged. And I'm having a hard time being in the same room with them, so I've just opted out. But I've come to the point now where if I'm in the room and I find an opportunity, I just don't think I'm going to hold my tongue. I think I'm done. And I don't know what that's going to mean. I don't know what the response is going to be, but I'm kind of past caring. I don't know, Peggy. I'm a mess. I know. I want to stick a fork in my eye too, but I don't. The last time I was there, which was just a couple of months ago, nobody brought it up. I feel like you do. I think if somebody brought it up, I wouldn't be able to hold my tongue, but we all have this silent agreement now. And then when I say all, it's really my sister is about the only one I have left. I have some nieces and nephews, but the rest of our family have all passed on. And that's another reason I think why it's so important to both of us to stay connected somehow, because there's not many of us left. And I would, if it came up, I wouldn't be able to hold my tongue, but that's why being quiet is hurtful. It's not just frustrating, it's hurtful. And I'm so angry that my last years are spent in this environment, that we've been so divided. And I was in high school in the 60s. I remember 1968 and all the horrendous things that were going on all through the 60s. And
I don't know that this time was worse yet. It's just different in the way that it's worse. And we did kind of come out of that, but maybe not really. All of this has been under the surface, and people got more politically correct, I guess. And Trump gave them permission to stop being politically correct and just let it all hang out. And now it's a big old fight. And I'll stop talking because I just
You're
get
fine,
angry.
Peggy. Well, you've given us a lot to think about, and I feel your pain. I relate completely to your situation, Peggy. It's so good to talk to you. Be safe out there, okay?
Thank you for taking my call. I appreciate you.
Yeah, we'll see you later. See, this is the difference in this conversation. We're relating like members of a family who can all connect in terms of values and hopes and dreams and goals and aspirations and interesting anecdotes and blah, blah, blah. And when I host For the Line, it's a guy calling in to talk about how God is, I don't know, soldered his name onto our genome and therefore Jesus. You know, it's just a whole other conversation. And both, I guess, are valid, but whatever. Catherine is dialing in from 937. Thanks for your patience. Are you there, Catherine?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can indeed. What's on your mind?
So, I am a mental health counseling student, and I'm actually taking some classes about rural mental health. The program I'm in has one of the only rural mental health certificates in the country. So I was like, I might have some insight, I guess, that maybe some other folks might not have. But I just wanted to say that I think the conversations you have been having are really interesting. And one of the things I've been learning is that rurality is really hard to define, like for research purposes. There's not really like an agreed upon definition of what rural really means. So that complicates like how we can study the mindset of people in rural places, because nobody can really agree like what is rural, you know. Is it resources? Is it like how many people live in an area, things like that. Nobody really agrees, which is interesting. I didn't know before my education. But one of the patterns I see is that rural people tend to have lower mental health outcomes. There's higher rates of suicide, less access to resources, and material and economic conditions are poorer in rural areas. Not saying that everybody's struggling right now, obviously, but it's, I think, something to consider that these areas are really struggling economically, access to healthcare, things like that. So that's my
No. I'm so glad for your perspective. Catherine, when I read the article at the beginning, the author was speaking to a kind of resentment to, I don't know, them silly city-dwelling elites that are indifferent or calloused about the problems of heartland Americans. Do you feel like there's merit to that? Was there resentment in the rural areas? Thinking, well, those city dwellers don't know us, they don't get us, they don't care, so screw them?
Yeah, I definitely think there is, like you were talking about, this othering, and I think there probably is that for urban folks. I know in my training that there are challenges for being a mental health provider in rural areas because, like, ethics are a little bit different. Like if you're in a community, your privacy has to be like really, 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 really strong. Not that it shouldn't be everywhere, but you know what I mean? Like if you're like, oh, hey, Bob, I just had a session with you, like at a grocery store. In like urban areas, you don't get that same sort of interaction, if that makes sense. And I guess my point is that I do think that while the resentment might not be valid or understandable, I do think like resources have been pulled away from these areas for so long. Like some of the things I've been learning, state legislatures, they don't support rural areas at all. They don't support urban areas. They don't support anybody. There's funding, there's bills they try to, progress these areas economically, and they get, they don't get past legislative bodies, so I think it's really complicated, and I think the material conditions of it all for all of us are important to recognize. Like, people are just like really struggling, and I think that does breed resentment.
When it comes to the subject of psychology here in Heartland, Red State, Oklahoma, I was trained to distrust mental health professionals, like, psychologists, psychiatrists, et cetera.
Yep.
In the blue states, in the blue areas, rather, they're all going to their therapist every day and they're weeping about their problems. And we were trained to think, well, either suck it up, buttercup, or the psychologist and the mental health professionals are dealing with things like depression because it's a spiritual issue, or they're indoctrinating their patients. Any merit to that?
Oh, 100, yes. 1,000% yes. And I think that stigma still very much exists. And that's another challenge of reaching folks. I honestly think everywhere. I don't live in a rural area myself, but I've worked in community mental health in an urban area, and that stigma is everywhere. People really, I think, it's weird because, like, mental health is so physical and vice versa, or physical health is very mental as well, but we treat mental health like it's different because it presents differently. But yes, you are absolutely right. And that's another challenge of reaching rural people, is overcoming that stigma and recognizing, like, hey, it's okay if these spiritual things help you, because as I'm a secular person, I'm an atheist, but as a
well, I'm losing you, Catherine. I'm sorry. Start me at the beginning of that sentence because I want to hear you.
No,
there's a
okay.
little bit of a glitch. So you're an atheist, but...
Sorry. Yes. But I, as a mental health professional, I'm trained to be not biased and to support someone. If someone is a religious person and they find healing in their faith, to not discount that. And that has been really interesting for me, to explore my own biases as an atheist, because in the beginning of my career, I'm like, oh, that feels weird. But I think of it more of like a psychological or sociological tool for people. I don't believe in the evidentiary, merits of religion, but if that's what's helping that person, I'm not going to discount it either. So I think a challenge for understanding rural folks is recognizing the biases that are built into their culture and their environments, and also recognizing that each rural community is different. I think we paint like a broad brush of like, it's white and it's idyllic, but really, like, rural areas are pretty diverse. That's what the research says, which is interesting. I didn't know that.
It is very much a community thing with the church. I take some heat. In fact, I'm releasing an interview in a few days with a Christian who is an ally and someone I admire tremendously. And, some people don't get that. And I really think most people use church for a sense of belonging and structure and family. I'm not defending the theology, nor am I saying we don't have those discussions. But you're right that we on the other side can be very uncharitable. Religion is a mental illness and bullshit like that. I also think it's interesting, and since you're a mental health student as well, people like to separate the body and the brain. Like, we have organs like the lungs and the heart and the liver and the kidneys, but somehow we don't treat the brain like part of the body. We say, well, is it a mental illness or is it a physical illness? but there really isn't a distinction. The brain is an organ, right?
Right, absolutely, 100%. And our physical health affects us mentally. There's a connection between, for example, cancer and depression. A lot of people with cancer develop depression. And there's complex reasons why that happens, but we can't separate both. We can't separate mental health from physical health because they're this one and the same. But the stigma of mental health in rural areas is really high. I did a paper on suicide in rural areas, and there are more suicides for rural folks. So I guess just like food for thought,
Well, Catherine, before I let you go, forgive the interruption, but I'm going to get this. Before I let you go, is the suicide because of a hopelessness? They're locked into a cycle of a failure? Or, what do you think drives the higher statistics for suicide in these rural areas?
I think that's a super complicated question, and I don't know if anybody has the answer, but from the research I've done, and there's not a lot of research out there, so this is another thing. We need to just research rural people more. There's just not enough. So that's one thing. But I think definitely hopelessness, and I also think that middle-aged men are really at risk for suicide. And in rural areas, they also have access to firearms. So I think that combination of factors is definitely at play there. But I also think that the stigma and lack of access to mental health care, they don't have the resources. They don't have the therapist they can call. They don't have the the mobile crisis team that can go out to them. Trump is defunding 988, which is horrible,
Yeah. The suicide hotline.
So all these, it is complicated, but I do think there's just this perfect storm of things that are happening in rural areas. And I think the material conditions.
I think an ingredient of that too, and this is very much true in Oklahoma, is men are still sort of taught that old school model where, if you were to admit that you had depression or that you were struggling mentally, that's weakness. Men are strong. Men have to suck it up and buckle up and pull themselves up by their bootstraps and put on the brave face and go out and be John Wayne. And it doesn't mean that all of those psychological issues and the heartache and the baggage and all of the stuff they drag around isn't there. But many don't have the tool set. They were never taught how to navigate that. And then cultural pressure is bottle it up, don't say anything, or else they're going to think you're a pansy, something like that.
Yep, absolutely, 100%. That is definitely a factor as well. So I don't know. It's I've learned so much from the classes I've taken. The professor that teaches the class is one of the leading researchers in this area in the whole world, which is really cool. And so I don't know. Just considering that everybody's struggling everywhere, including in rural areas, and listening to Peggy and how do you talk to your family members? I don't know. I struggle with the same things. I don't talk to my dad because he's a, Trump supporter, MAGA, ultra Catholic nationalist person. I don't know. But, if you have moments where you can show kindness to someone, even that you disagree with, it might make a difference.
Yeah.
It's so hard, I know.
It's messy, Catherine. No. I'm on your page. And this is a refreshing injection of compassion and perspective into the final chapter of the show here. And it's so good to talk to you. So all my best in your studies. And let's talk again down the road, okay?
Yeah, for sure, Seth. And thank you for all that you do. You've been an inspiration for me. You actually have been an example of empathy for me. So
Really? Because
I really
I'm
appreciate
struggling
you.
with empathy
Yes.
these days. I'm telling you, I'm struggling, but I'm trying. And the fact that you picked up on that is just a huge gift to me. Thanks for the kind words. Be safe out
Yeah.
there, okay?
Of course.
All right.
You too.
We'll
Thank
see you later.
Right.
I have my moments. I mean, I posted something on Facebook just recently, and it was somebody holding up a sign, and it said, "In this house, we say please, thank you, and fuck Trump." I stand, you know what? And I actually wrote this. I'll read it to you to finish the show today. I don't despise him for the sake of hate. I hate the cruelty, stupidity, and grift. The fact that he's only happy when aggrandizing himself, creeping on women, or insulting others. His cartoonish lies embraced by fools. Don is everything parents teach their children not to be. Egotistical, greedy, a bully, a deceiver, a predator who ranks himself by pussies grabbed, golden trinkets sold, and detractors punished. He's a best friend of Epstein. The guy trolling Miss Teen USA dressing rooms, a federally convicted rapist. Is it Trump derangement syndrome to strongly oppose the dismantling of decorum, democracy, and decency? Or is it rather TDS to be a red-hatted enabler? I only say fuck Trump because stronger language evades me. That's how I feel about the man. But I'm trying with his cult. I'm trying looking for a breakthrough. I don't know. Appreciate your perspective on the broadcast today, and I appreciate so much your support, encouragement, and community. I'll see you next time, and we'll do it again.